everybody, my name is Allison. If you're new to my channel, I write YA dark fantasy, and today we're talking about character names. So there's lots of different ways to create character names, and I chose 5 methods that I personally like to use to name my characters. So the first one is to use a significant plot point or trait to name a character. So if your character is strong or really beautiful, maybe look for names that mean beauty or strength or something like that. That way it ties in, and it's a fun little nugget for readers to realize that, like, hey, this character's name means strong, and he's like the strong character in the novel. And that could be like strength in mind, like physical strength, like anything like that. For example, I named a character in Dark Radiance Tabitha, and her name means clear-sighted, a roe deer or gazelle, and pretty much it's like beauty and grace in Greek. So she is very beautiful. She's one of the most beautiful characters in the novel, and she has a lot of grace in the way she walks and the way she talks, and she's just like that kind of character. So I named her Tabitha because I like that name. One, make sure you like the name if you're doing this method, and 2, it matched her personality. The second method is era names. So if you're writing a book in, say, the 1920s, you're not gonna name a character Everly, which is very popular in 2019. I just use the name Everly because I've had like 4 or 5 friends name their daughters Everly, and it's a very popular name. So that doesn't match with the 1920s. The top 3 names that were really popular in the 1920s were Mary, Dorothy, and Helen. So you could choose just like popular names that were in that era. It doesn't have to be like the top name, but look up charts that say like most popular names in the 1920s or unique popular names in the 20s. Stuff like that. That way you're keeping the names consistent with the time period, unless, say, your characters are time travelers. Then you can name them whatever you want. But if you're writing like a historical or a piece that's set in a time era, try to keep the names in the time period that you're writing about. I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to do any of these things, but it's just a suggestion. Number 3 are different first initials for large ensemble casts. So I have a pretty large ensemble cast in Dark Radiance. There are only 2 characters that have the same initial in that ensemble, and I'll talk about that down on point number 5. But it's really hard for readers to get names that are very similar. So you wouldn't name a character Layla and Layton because readers are going to be stumbling over those names. They're not going to realize who's talking. It's really hard for characters in a big ensemble cast to stand out if their names are so similar. I think one person who does a really good job of this is Cassandra Clare in her Shadowhunter books, specifically in like the Mortal Instruments books. For example, it's Clary, Simon, Isabel, Jace, Alec, Magnus. None of those names have the same first initial, and it was really easy to keep track of who Clary was, who Simon was, who Jace was, and I never got them mixed up in the world because they had a different initial for each name. Number 4 is to listen to names around you when you're out in public or when you're at work or anything like that. If you work somewhere where you can like collect names like in your word bank jar in your mind. I worked at a daycare center, and there was a set of twins named Sawyer and Jax. I might use those later on in writing pieces. Just like listen when you're out and about to people talking or anything like that, because it really does bring up some like really cool names. And the 5th and final tip I have is multiples ? And that just means if you have multiples in your story, so like twins or triplets, I find that their names are very hard for me to name, but I have a little bit of a trick for that. So the first one is naming the same same letter. I know I said not to do this, but with multiples, it's easy to differentiate them, especially if they are boy and girl. So, and if they're girl and girl, maybe they are like one and the same, so they need a very similar name. Multiples are like exception to this method I use. So one of my multiples in Dark Radiance are Asher and Aspen. They're just different enough that you know which is which. Obviously, Asher is the boy twin and Aspen is the girl twin, and they have very distinct voices when they're with each other, but they work. And I was really afraid when I named them this that my betas would get confused, but they actually said that they liked that their names kind of went together because the way they act in Dark Radiance really reflects that they're a cohesive like twin pack, if that makes sense. So like it works. But if you don't want to do it that way, choose names that mean something and they sound good together. So like I have a triplet pair in Dark Radiance as well, and so I named them, this has Tabitha in it, so Tabitha, Mallory, and Delaney. They all sound really good together and they all have meanings. I don't know, I'm a really like cohesive person. I like things to like sound pretty together and like flow nicely off the tongue. Those are my tips for you. I hope you enjoy learning some of my methods that I like to use when writing my characters or creating my characters. And if you have any tips, leave them down below so I know. And if you have any questions, let me know. I will see you next time, loves. Bye.